Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by Fred and Lou Hartwig and viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly, and our topics this week: voters decide the fate of city council candidates. Those same voters may one day decide the fate of a new convention hotel. And the Brownback experiment, a fait accompli or just fatal, plus roast and toast. But we start with our Newsmaker segment and welcome one of the new soon-to-be members of the Kansas City, Missouri City Council. Quinton Lucas was elected at large from the 3rd District. He's a native Kansas Citian, trained as a lawyer at Cornell Law, a KU Law School professor, and the recipient of much praise from Kansas City Star political writer Steve Kraske. Quoting now, Quinton Lucas sparkles. From the cut of his suit to the brilliance of his smile, from the wow-inducing resume to his polished presentation, Lucas catches the light. And Mr. Kraske adds that some local Democrats compare our guest to a future Barack Obama and see him as potential mayor material. Councilman-elect Lucas, welcome to Ruckus. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Have you sent Mr. Kraske a lengthy thank you note yet?
Well, I've never been told that I sparkle by anyone, so I appreciate at least a new description.
Hey, why did you decide to run for the city council? You're at KU Law, a very good job as a professor. Why run for the city council?
You know, Mike, I thought it was important to get involved in the community, like a lot of folks, perhaps like you. I read the newspaper every morning. Some days you shake your head and wonder what's going on, and I thought, well, gosh, I could either complain or write letters or actually just jump into this campaign. And there were 6 candidates in the race. It has only been a year of a campaign, but it felt far longer. But it's been a fascinating odyssey. Look forward to service.
Well, you won by a huge margin. Didn't you have like 72% or so of the vote?
I was lucky enough to have 74% of the vote.
Is this the first elective office you've run for?
This is. And frankly, kind of my first real dive into the large political scene. I've done some board service in Kansas City, but this is the first.
Well, what about the campaign surprised you, first of all, and what disappointed you?
You know, I guess first with the surprises. You know, the most amazing thing is when you start meeting with people and then for some reason, after talking to them for 5 minutes, they decide they trust you. Another surprise briefly is that, you know, people often say there's a 3rd District problem. What's the biggest problem of the 3rd District? What's the biggest problem in the city?
3rd District is like what we call the core or inner city, right?
Right. More of the east side and kind of the northern half. And I saw that regardless if someone lived in the Northland, if they lived in the inner city, if they lived in South Kansas City, they were often talking about the same things: retaining population in Kansas City, attracting jobs. And so that was something that I think was actually impressive. Everybody kind of cares about lots of the same stuff. You know, disappointing in politics is that sometimes it's tough to be a newcomer. There are a lot of entrenched interests in others, and I enjoyed kind of rocking the boat at least to start.
Let's take a quick tour of some of the issues that will likely be left over on the council agenda when you take office in August. What about KCI? Do you want that refurbished or rebuilt?
You know, at this point, I think the broadest idea is that we need to make a case for why we need to spend money up there. And so I think I would be more pro the refurbish idea if we need a full rebuild. I think that argument hasn't been made yet either to the voters or to the council, so I would look forward to more discussion there.
A downtown streetcar line, starter streetcar system is about to be initiated in Kansas City. There's already talk of expanding it. What do you think about expansion?
You know, on the streetcar expansion idea, again, we need to make sure that it's part of a broader, even metro or region-wide discussion on public transit. So I think step one is to get the current streetcar line up and running. And then when we talk about expansion, we have to talk about how we connect that streetcar line with east-west transit routes and others.
There's been a lot of talk in recent days about a downtown convention hotel, and last week our guest was Dan Coffey from a group that's concerned about it being built with, in part, city dollars. What are your thoughts about a downtown convention hotel?
You know, I certainly understand the arguments that we need more hotel rooms to attract large-scale conventions. I'll have 2 points there. First, I would enjoy the fact for the next council to actually have some part of the discussion. It may get considered before we get there, so to the extent we don't, you know, I would add that we have to make sure that our estimates are appropriate right now. I think that was the concern in some ways with the Power and Light District. More importantly than that, however, is that we're talking about that catering contract in connection there too. And I'd like to see the city make sure we can still be competitive for lots of folks who've been working with Bartle Hall and the Convention Center for some time.
Do you think this new council is going to work cohesively?
I'm excited about this new council. You know, there's some talk about factions and all those types of things. I've been on the campaign trail in probably 35 different forums with folks. And I think everyone comes across as a professional, somebody who's ready to work, and somebody who's running for the best interest of the city.
Do you generally find yourself aligned with Sly James' agenda?
You know, I respect the mayor. I've respected him since I was a young lawyer. He was the first black partner at Blackwell Sanders, the former firm, and so I like him greatly. And his agenda, I think, has been one that's been helpful for Kansas City. And if you talk about Kansas City today, as opposed to 4 years ago and the end of Mark Funkhauser's administration, I think we're in a much better place.
Well, this mayor has to learn to enhance his popularity. Mr. Lucas, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Pleasure
Mike.
to meet you. Thank you for coming by, and congratulations on your very big victory. That is Kansas City, Missouri Councilman-elect Quinton Lucas. Now let's meet the Ruckettes and see if there's any way to start a ruckus. John Stevens is founder and president of Rock Hill Strategic. Steve Gloriosa is a media and political consultant. Cynthia Wheeler is a communications strategist. And attorney Steve Marakian is with the firm of Wersch, Hobbs and Marakian. Well, let's continue our discussion of the Kansas City election this past Tuesday. As even the worst political analysts could have prophesied, Sly James won a landslide re-election victory with 87% of the vote and will serve another 4 years as the city's mayor. 12 others will join him around the table at city council meetings. Here are the winners. 1st District, Heather Hall and Scott Wagner. 2nd District, Dan Fowler and Teresa Lohr. 3rd District, Jermaine Reed and Quinton Lucas. 4th District, Jolie Justice and Catherine Shields. 5th District, Alicia Kennedy and Lee Barnes. And in the 6th District, Kevin McManus and Scott Taylor. Well, Steve Glorioso, you've seen a lot of these city elections and you've been involved in many of them. Are you surprised by any of the results?
No, actually not. And I'm very pleased, without making a comment on individual winners, but I think the overall mix of this council is quite outstanding. I was very pleased with the number of young people like Quinton Lucas, who was on earlier. I think there's 4, maybe 5 council people in their 30s. There's more women than there was in the last council. And so I think that will lead to a lot of kind of a vibrant discussion. I know it's kind of cliche-ish, but having served in City Hall and for a mayor, previous Mayor Barnes, it really matters. You know, if it's the same old, you can almost predict the outcome. And I think this will be a fun group to watch.
Well, there was a big push by the mayor and by the Kansas City Star to generate a large turnout at the polls, and that effort was unsuccessful. Like 34,000 people voted. Wow. What about that? What happened, John? Why didn't people get out and vote?
I think people gravitated towards the mayoral race, and once that was predetermined, many people just did not dig into it. I mean, you were looking in some of the counties north of the river, 7% turnout, I believe, and I think people just didn't get excited about individual council races, and that's too bad, and we have to do better.
We hear so much about the value of term limits, but 2 former members of the city council are now back on the council, Teresa Lohr and Catherine Shields. People run, serve a couple of terms, leave, and come back. Does that make the value of term limits less impressive and less important?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that people who, like Catherine Shields, for example, I mean, these are people who have a lot of experience. I think term limits generally, in my opinion, are good. But in my view, it doesn't mean that somebody should never run again and should not be reelected after they've been out for a while. The idea is to get a mix, as Steve was mentioning. Get this mix of people coming and going, people from different walks of life, different age groups, different racial groups, and so forth, men and women. And I think term limits helps us do that. But I have no problem with somebody of her quality being reelected to be on the city council.
No, and I don't either. I'm very much for the term limits, but I do think the one thing we can look at is this unintended consequence of low voter turnout.
What is that?
And I think that's a fear that we should really look at. You know, are we how do we get young people to vote? We got great young people in office, but do we keep the initiative of changing boundary lines, or do we find creative ways to drive them to the polls, or creative ways for them to access voting? That's how you change the number. And June, come on, everybody's starting their vacation. I mean, we moved. It's a bad time.
Steve, weren't you among the architects of the plan to move the primary to later in the year?
I like you, Steve. I'm not going to beat you up.
Defend it because I can't see why people would like to have us vote in February. It's not just that we were voting in February; it's that we were expecting citizens and candidates to go out in our coldest month. We have the most snow usually in February, and try to conduct an election. The only hiccup was that once we changed it to April for the primary, the state law insisted that we have 10 weeks to the general. We had intended to be April and at the end of May, have basically about 7 weeks, which would be about right. The turnout is determined by a lot of things. Yeah. You ever see the turnout difference between when a president's on the ballot and when a president's not?
But even that's low, people. I mean, even that's low. We have this.
Well, but that's 60%. We're down to like 11.
But the impact of a reduced vote count is in the number of people needed to file initiative petitions at City Hall. Is that not the concern?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're going to talk about an example of that in just a moment.
There's a solution to this, Mike. It's a simple solution. Steve, I'm surprised you didn't think of this. You pass out ballots at a Royals game, you'll get 36,000 there.
Thank you.
And everybody votes. And
we could have done it at the turnstiles.
But
you know what? You want to see a decent turnout so that the people elected have a more legitimacy. There's more buy-in.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate, but Kay Barnes was reelected. There was only 52,000 people out of 300,000 registered voters.
Oh, that's 20,000 more than voted in this last election.
Yeah, I know, but it was a fact. And that was not as bad as this. You know, Sam Glazer put on a dog and pony show. General Lee, no one even knew who he was.
I also think that we should put the onus on this incoming council, too. There's a diverse mix of people, very talented people. Let's make sure that they get out in their community, that they start reaching out across the city and really inspire some people to turn out for the next election.
A quick final question, anybody who wants to answer it. Why was there such weak opposition to Sly James? Is he that good as mayor that no one of substance wanted to run against him?
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth.
Don't everybody answer at once.
No, I think it's a real serious problem. Sly James has been a good mayor, no question. However, there are some very, very significant issues facing the city, and it seems to me that somebody, qualified individual, could have run and said, I disagree with the mayor on certain directions he wants to take the city. I've been a proponent of Sly for years. I think he's a great mayor. However, it's disappointing to me in Kansas City we can't get a reasonable candidate to oppose him.
All right, what was supposed to be a slam dunk for the current city council, approval of plans for an 800-room, $300 million downtown hotel may be blocked or at least delayed by action from Citizens for Responsible Government. CFRG is undertaking a petition campaign designed to force the council to submit the hotel plan for a public vote. The campaign was announced last week here on Ruckus by the group's founder, Dan Coffey. Coffey says the group is not opposed to the hotel, just opposed to the use of taxpayer money to help finance it. So would you call this petition effort responsible, irresponsible, or something else, John?
Irresponsible. It's having the public and having citizens represent and have a voice in the government process is really important. But this level of government by referendum is really an effort to grind government to a halt, to delay projects, to slow projects in such a way that they're unable to proceed even after maybe the vote occurs and they're not, and it's proven to be a valid, worthwhile project that benefits the citizens. It still can slow and really grind government to a halt.
You know, we have this history of build and they will come. And we've done that thinking that we're going to bring great tourism business in. And we've done that thinking that if we build 400,000 square feet of uncontiguous space, it's going to happen if we put this downtown. But the question for me is what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the airport or the hotel? And if you can build an 800-room hotel, but if you have no way of getting people here and airports or airlines don't want to park their planes or coast from the gate out to the strip and vice versa because it costs them more money, what's the point? And then the other issue is you're talking a $20 million piece of property. I'm going to pay for a private entity to build and make a profit versus a public utility that needs to be uplifted and create a global access tool to my city. So for me as a citizen, the question is, what comes first?
Well, some people are saying that even an 800-room hotel is not going to make a substantial difference. Bill Lucas, who runs Crown Center and the Crown Center hotels, says occupancy for hotels would have to double by 300,000 more rooms rented per year if this is going to succeed.
This is why I disagree with John, respectfully, because he has great knowledge in these areas. I think these initiative kinds of things are actually good. I think it is very important for the people of Kansas City to have an opportunity, the 30,000 who will vote, to have an opportunity to address exactly these kinds of issues. I am not a big proponent of joint ventures, city or government using government funds to help finance. I think it can be done in an appropriate way, as the mayor has said many times, as long as the city is not on the hook for the debt and so forth and so on. So I don't think it's always a bad thing. However, I also agree with Cynthia. There are real important issues here that I think should be addressed. The proponents of this plan should come forward and convince the voters of Kansas City this is a good thing for us. And if they can't convince them, then they shouldn't have this jointly financed kind of a deal. If some private developer wants to build a hotel, let him build his hotel.
And there are other
but I
private
think
properties.
having the people involved in these kinds of a thing, I don't think grinds government to a halt. Sometimes grinding government to a halt is the very best thing we can do.
Steve Glorioso, Steve Glorioso,
yes.
If not Steve Morak, if council action, please don't. If council action is delayed even for a while, can't that have a seriously negative impact on the investors?
Well, yes, it can, and that's where I would agree with the lesser Steve over there, and that would be, you know, if you don't like private-public, Cynthia and Steve, you obviously don't think Sprint Center was worth doing. I think Sprint Center is one of the greatest things the city's done in my lifetime. People love it. It was a public-private. It could not have, you know, Anschutz, oh, well, you want an arena, build one. Can't be done. You have to have these type of partnerships. Now, regarding putting this on the ballot, we can't do that. You can't put a very complicated $300 million deal together and then wait 6 months for an election, which you know, only can have elections certain dates. I mean, it would be dysfunctional. And lastly, we're a big city. We can do more than one thing at a time.
But Steve, if CFRG gets the necessary number of signatures and they're validated, is there any way to avoid having an election?
Yes, there is.
What
but
is
I'm
that,
not going to
Steve?
give them free advice.
I love it. It's not giving them free advice.
There's at least two ways to have the deal done before whatever that goofball gets on.
So they can rush this through and get it finalized, it seems to me. Doesn't that seem rational? If they go ahead, the council moves before the next week or two and gets this approved, then the effort would be negated.
Yeah, and I don't know. Steve has more knowledge about this than I would ever even hope to have.
Well, sure.
But however, I will say this: I think that'd be a bad idea. I don't want to see a council rushing through just to beat a vote. I want to make it a good plan, like Steve said. Sprint Center is a prime example. I love the Sprint Center idea. It can work if it's done properly, but I want to make sure the city's not on the hook for a big debt if it doesn't work.
And I have to say, just jump in here, it's not that I'm opposed to those projects, but there are some serious dollars and bond issues to consider as we move forward. That's all.
Speaking of moving forward, we will do that. Steve Rose is apparently the only local writer to regularly appear on the Star's editorial page who can claim some Republican credentials. But even Rose is nonplussed by the actions of Kansas Governor Sam Brownback and his GOP colleagues in the state legislature concerning tax cuts, budget deficits, and most recently, tax increases. Rose writes, "The Kansas I have known all my life valued stability, cherished public schools, was proud of its higher education, took care of its highways, and was sympathetic to the needy. It was truly a state where common sense prevailed. No more. A revolution has occurred." Now, Mr. Morakian, you're a longtime Johnson County resident, and I would say also a longtime Republican. Are you in sync with Mr. Rose on this?
No, I'm not. You know, I think Steve, really, I read his article. I thought, my God, he's going to hyperventilate here. I'd never seen more use of the you know, of exaggeration and hyperbole. And I think I'm looking out my window and saying, oh my God, there's no more roads. The schools are all shut down. All the needy people are starving. Look. there are all kinds of reasonable bases for criticizing the governor's tax plan and for criticizing the way that the legislature failed to act to resolve certain things. However, when you start throwing around these terms like revolutionary and extremist, when you're talking about what the question is it a revolutionary idea to say, we want to try to give the localities more control over taxes and stop the legislature from continuing to increase taxes? Is it revolutionary to try to rein in spending in certain ways? And are we going to call people anti-public school because they oppose Common Core or because they favor school choice? I mean, this notion that the state of Kansas now has essentially no schools that will be worthwhile, the roads are all falling apart, all the programs for the needy are gone, and all of this is because we have a group of legislators who couldn't find a good way to get a balance in terms of how we fill a budget gap that's been caused by what probably was an ill-advised plan by the governor. Then that's legitimate commentary, that's legitimate criticism. Calling these people extremists goes way over the top.
Is it not fair to say that Brownback campaigned on this idea of tax cuts?
Of course he did.
Reaganomics.
Of course he did.
And this discussion about the future of the budget in Kansas was part of the election debate, and people knew what might be coming, and they overwhelmingly elected Brownback and the GOP. Oh, go ahead, John.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say I completely agree with Steve on the rhetoric. I think having the extremist rhetoric is not helpful. It's not beneficial. You know, it is not beneficial in this conversation. But the legislature and Governor Brownback did fail. And they failed very clearly. If you cut revenue, you cut expense. That's not a partisan discussion. That is logic. And they failed in doing that. And they also sent a ticking time bomb down the road to the next session where they don't have KDOT and other things to sweep that they're going to have to address next year. And it's going to be even worse if they're not careful.
Something happened before we began taping the program this morning, something that had not been predicted during the course of the planning for the program. So let me mention, in a 6-3 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court this morning upheld subsidies paid to people in states where the states did not establish insurance exchanges. The vote was 6-3. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion. What's your reaction? Are you surprised, Steve?
I'm not at all surprised.
It's a victory for the president.
Well, it is certainly a victory for the president. I'm not at all surprised. I think the court was backed into a corner in the sense that the way this legislation has come out, and in my view, it's bad legislation and it's bad for the country, but the fact is, it is what it is. There are millions of people who would be devastated if the Supreme Court had said, we're striking out the whole plan. Okay? But what bothers me about the opinion, just from a legal analysis, is that Justice Roberts, who wrote the opinion in the first case, who said that it's not up to the court to rewrite legislation to save people from essentially the incompetence of their governance, then to write this opinion, or basically joining the opinion, if he wrote it or joined in it,
right,
saying basically, we're going to rewrite this legislation to make it work. Justice Scalia is exactly correct when he now says this is basically SCOTUS care. The Supreme Court has basically said, you guys in Congress screwed it all up, so we're going to rewrite it and make it work. It's still not going to work.
We put a different name on it because we don't like the way it turns out, so we blame somebody else because we're not happy with its setting. That's kind of what I think I'm going to hear in the next few days, but I'm pleased to see that it happened. Yep. And I had no doubt that they would uphold that decision.
Steve, we talked with you when you were on the program previously about this, and you thought all along that this was going to be upheld.
Yes, I'm a lawyer. No,
he plays one on TV.
You know, some of it's wishful thinking. And to quote Bill Clinton, who's, I think, in our lifetime, the shrewdest politician ever, and he said this about a month ago, if we get past this decision, Obamacare, ACA, will become so common like Medicare, which is basically what it is in a more convoluted way that everyone loves, and was called socialized medicine in the 60s, which is, but it's a great program. I'm really happy. I'm almost as happy as the night they passed the bill. We have 10 million Americans that would have been without insurance. 10 million. Why? How can you hate someone so much, Obama, by the right wing that they want to scuttle insurance for 10 million people? They never were for it.
Well, you sometimes make it easy.
Yeah.
Just kidding. It is time now for Roast and Toast, where the Rockettes offer a high five or a low blow to people at events in the news. And let's start with Cynthia.
I raise my cup to Ambassador Alan Katz and the Village Square organization for trying to bring civil discourse into conversations about things that affect our lives. So, here, Alan.
Steve Glorioso.
Oh my goodness, thank you. It's a roast to the many Republican presidential candidates who scurried to reject campaign or return campaign contributions they received from an Earl Holt, an avowed racist, whose website was linked to Dillard Roof, the murderer of 6 black church members. Yes, they've now returned or rejected and redirected hundreds of thousands of dollars from Mr. Holt. But why don't you ask yourself this question? What does it say about me and how I am perceived on the issue of race relations that a bigot like Holt would give me money in the first place? I say what it says about Holt is that he thinks you're as racist as he is. You just don't say it out loud like he does.
Got to move quickly, Steve Marakian.
I have a dual roast for the Pope and the President for conflating science, politics, and religion. The Pope says climate change is the result of unfettered capitalism. The President says racism is in our DNA. Neither is true, neither is good science. China is the world's largest polluter. It's not capitalist. The U.S. is a capitalist and is one of the world's cleanest countries. Likewise, the U.S. is one of the least racist countries in the world compared, for example, with Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, parts of the world. Perhaps the President is racist to his core, but most Americans are not, and proved this by electing a black man twice. The Pope should stick to religion, the President should stick to politics, because neither of them knows anything about science.
John.
My toast is to Sprint CEO Marcello Clore and the employees of Sprint. After years of being a downtrodden company, falling behind in Kansas City, and one of Kansas City's largest employers, in a short amount of time, he's inspired trust, he's inspired hope, and he's made the difficult yet necessary changes, I think, to secure Kansas City as a major employer for the future. And I hope he continues that trend.
And finally, this is a roast to the University of California for its guidance to faculty about microaggressions, defined as everyday verbal, nonverbal slights, snubs, or insults that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon their marginalized group membership. Examples of what not to say: America is a melting pot. Everyone can succeed in this society if they work hard enough, and America is the land of opportunity. It appears, at least to me, the problem at UC is not microaggression, it's macro-idiocy. And that is Ruckus for this week. We're back next Thursday evening at 7. Now, on behalf of the Ruckettes and the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.